All right. So why don't you just zoom out and...
Okay, so let's see the whole range. It's a little bit, it's reasonably sized, I would say. But
I like the color coding.
Yeah. It has some sense. Hopefully it makes sense. To me it makes sense. That's more important, I guess. It helps you to find stuff, really. It's when it gets messy, you see, I've stripped it down, obviously.
100.
Yeah, that's
Perfect 100.
Yeah, almost. I've just added them to have a perfect 100 here. So
most of it's just backing vocals.
Exactly, it's just empty tracks. It helps. There's slightly pinky stuff and slightly is everything that's soft. It sounds like it looks. So more pads and atmospheres and the intro and stuff, which is all also grouped to a bus, which we can get into later on, how everything is grouped. But mostly the color coding represents also kind of a grouping in a mixing sense. So you have a separation there. So we can hit there atmospheres and pads. So pinky stuff, vocal samples here, down there, out of the way. Then more the effecty section with different kinds of tonal reverby, effecty stuff, or
Gotcha.
Right.
So kind of more transition-y stuff.
Yeah.
This is the funny thing about psytrance, actually, is that if you look at like a Pro Tools session for a mixing engineer in rock, it tends to be, drums, guitar space. Whereas this kind of music can get so abstract. It's hard to group. It's like tonal things.
Yeah, because you make out of instruments or synths, you can create atmospheres or effecty sounds. So they become something that's
hard to classify.
Yeah, but that's also the kind of the process of how I work. A lot of it is I don't want to say accidental, which is, although it plays a big part, a lot of stuff happens just accidentally, but it's a lot of using the same sounds or kind of processing them in a way, like really rinse a sound, just use it to the max, because you can do wonders with only one synth, or let's be even more radical with one waveform. You can do so much. So this is what I try as well. Be more creative with single stuff instead of searching for new sounds or flicking through presets, which is a time eater as well. So most of those things are made out of stuff which is already in the project, sounds, whatever. So and then we have those slightly more orangey, bitey sounds. This one is also called biting wobble, funny enough. Okay, so more scratchy stuff and stuff like that. The same here, the orangey stuff, stabby.
We'd call the grid.
Yeah, the grid.
Everyone's got their own word.
Yeah, I call them. I always say, I have to do those combos. So for me, those are the combo sounds or shots or whatever, because for me, for this to make sense, it always has to be like kind of a question and answer thing, if that makes sense.
Conversation.
Yeah, it's a conversation between, like, I've heard people also writing alien talk or something like that, which is quite accurate. You need some, in order to make sense. You need some kind of complement each other, the sounds. You really need to pay attention for that. That's it takes time. In the beginning, it's often very, what sounds fit together. A good approach would be taking one sound and then do other things out of that. So you kind of automatically have, it sounds similar, it's in the same family of sounds, but you have different kind of slight variations. So this is how you could come around that as well. So right, so that's grouped. It's quite a few. I have a lot of those. If you want to put them all together, basically, they all do some sort of question and answer thing. Let's go to a fuller part and play that for a second. So there's a lot of stuff in there. There are kicks with distortion and reverb even. There are obviously lead sounds. There are whatever. It's a kind of a marriage between rhythmic gridding and also tonal content. Yeah, exactly.
One term we came up with in the Sonic Species class was, it's like synth percussion.
Synth percussion, it does it. Yeah, it does it. That's
it's so rhythmic.
Yeah, that's the one. What I use a lot, like that's a big part of my tracks. I went away from ARPs or lead lines, because for me simply, as a musician, it's an obvious thing to do, like playing ARPs, melody lines, which totally have their significance and relevance in music. But I because I come from that background, I was more into developing a super technical, high-techy sound, if you want.
Sure.
So that's what I went for, and they sound very high-techy to me.
More
it always
abstract.
gives abstract, some sort of movement going on. So and obviously we have the percussion section, everything that's green, snares, open hi-hats, kick and bass, blue. So
which is a perfect segue there. I mean, obviously, kick and bass, it's the bedrock, it's the foundation. Yeah. So, why don't you just take us through it?
I can go into the processing here for a while. We can go later on in depth into how to synthesize the bass line, because that's something I guess everybody wants to know, but also a lot of people know already. So it's, I guess I hope, and also you hope that we will be able to kind of debunk some myths.
Sure.
And about how to create, how to make it fat, and how to sit nice in the mix, how to roll together.
Yeah. Because there's Phil's going to be taking us in detail through kick and bass from scratch later on in this class. So anything that doesn't get fully exposed now, we're going to be looking at later on.
Exactly.
But nowhere to hide.
Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. We are right here. Kick and bass is still blue. Let me just bring down that a notch, because it sounds, it looks overdriven.
Waveforms.
Yeah, the waveform is a bit cranked up because the track was generally made at a very low volume, so all the waveform looks a little bit low. Anyway, that's the kick, dear people, and that's the bass. Okay. Some might think there is no information in this, but you're wrong. There is a few features how you can identify a good kick drum as well. If you have a lot of audio samples, you got some kicks from friends, or you're trying to create your own kick drum. Because I want to go a little bit in depth here, but we will go more in depth later on. Sure. This is just the audio. So a good kick, usually, in my opinion.
Can we just hear it?
Yes. Okay.
It's like butter, man.
Yeah, thanks. I hope it doesn't smell like old butter. So, however, a good kick drum, in my opinion, it has a it has a slight. It is a pitched down sine wave, if you will, in the furthest sense. So, but it's a lot about this shape and form. So after the initial transient, which is obviously squeezed together, which creates that
The pitch.
exactly the pitch. It's a faster pitch though, and it's actually how I have created a few kick drums in Contact back in the days, with 2 different pitch envelopes, so one for the tail and one for the top, because basically it's you can create it with a fast pitch sound and with a more subby. So you can anyway. Together combined, it should look like this really. It should have a nice attack. It should go down right after the attack, and then a nice tail. This section here is really pretty much from there on. It becomes bassy, and this is what determines your tonality more or less of the kick. The tonal stuff doesn't happen much here.
Right. That's actually an EQ bump if you think about it, right? Because that's where the frequency is lowest in volume at that point in the pitch.
Yes, you can obviously, because it creates high frequencies, you can enhance that with boosting high frequencies because it creates high frequencies. But initially, I would say to get the how to say the actual the tone of the kick is really the speed of the pitch. So this is where it gets this old school goa like or where it really sounds modern and snappy and with a short pitch. So a lot of it is taste, but a lot of it is also can be scientifically and rationally explained to get like this rolling kick and bass. So obviously one of the very, very important things is this overlap here. If you wonder why your kick doesn't roll or why it sounds separated, it's because something like this is happening. Somebody might have told you, or you think that bass frequencies are not allowed to overlap because they will create some sort of phasing. You can use your ears. It helps extremely. If it sounds good, it is good most of the times. It's just this. When does it sound good? Unfortunately, there is no recipe or there is no. You have to. It's experience as well. At some point, you will be able to.
No silver bullet.
No, there is none. You will have to kind of train your ears over the years to be able to filter out what sounds good and what's not. How will it sound in a mix? So, however. Yeah, this overlap is very, very important. I can give you just a very, very extreme example. And with? Without? With? So you can see there is a marriage between each other. There is a kind of a glue, a link. So that's one thing to. So now it's very, very crucial that this is not too long, that this is not too short. So, but all of this later on in the kick and bass. So this is just how this kick and bass is done.
So you made this kick yourself?
This kick was made myself. It's called here F sharp. It's tuned onto the bass line, and that's another. Well, obvious,
Crucial.
but that's another reason why it sounds so well together, because it's also tuned. I think that's a very, very important thing. I try to tune before I change an EQ or especially with drums, for example. Before I change an EQ, I try to pitch it up or down, because then you can really achieve also some sort of frequency shifts there, which you necessarily can't achieve with an EQ. And it's not a golden rule again, but it's something worth considering as well. So, but for kick and bass, you want it to be one unit, one solid unit. So it would make sense to pitch it, to pitch your kick to a bass or your bass to a kick. So more of this later on. To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure what bassline this is, because I'm using really variety of synths. I don't have a go-to synth. I would also not say use this as a baseline. Go out there, get some demos of some synths, try it. It's a very simple principle of how a psytrance baseline is made, which we will go into later on. So you can basically do it with any synth.
Yeah.
So there is no magic really to that. It's more about the physical thing, how the pressure is traveling through the air, how you process it, what you do with the low frequencies, how you massage them. So
So you resampled it,
yes, this was done in a synth, obviously, and then it was
and then you processed it.
it was processed, and then
then
it
you
was
sampled.
and then it was again audio, because even if the re-trigger of the synth is accurate, I find, especially for kick and bass, you need that very constant
Right.
pumping, and I couldn't achieve it like if it was not in audio.
Same.
I would also, that's a very, very big part as well. If you want your kick and bass really tight, you should put it to audio, I would say, and play as well with the sequence. With the quantization of it. Excuse me. Some bass lines require some shifting. That's nature, due to the nature of the envelope of the synth, of how every synth is different, will generate a different waveform, and you will tweak it different. So it might need, or you have a phase issue. So, for example, you don't want a wave exactly in the opposite way running, so that would mean you would cancel stuff out. So
Right.
it kind of goes with the wave.
Have you engineered this to look like that?
Yes. I mean, I look at it. And I pay very close attention. There is a free plugin which you might have seen. I'm sure you have.
This is a big part of the Sonic Species Masterclass. Actually.
There you go. And it's very crucial, I would say. This allows you to see your waveform. It prints it into a WAV file, how it would look when it's exported. Here it doesn't make much sense because it's already in audio, but you would see the sum of kick and bass together. So it's still, if you see here, that's the bass line. Let's dial in the bass to the kick and see what happens. The first thing,
it looks like it's complementing. It looks like the bass is actually complementing the kick. It's complementing that part of the cycle as opposed to like meeting it at cross purposes.
yes.
It added a bit of spikiness.
Exactly. When you noticed in the very, very tail of the kick, there were those little spikes added. So to get this typical full-on roll, as you might have suspected, this is a little bit lower than this. That's a reason as well, because obviously those parts are overlapping, those two parts, yeah. So they add up in bass. You want a unity, so you don't necessarily want. It depends what kind of sound you want. You can. I like, for this track, I've chosen like a more rolling, the typical full-on roll, which is achieved if you pay attention to the very end of the tail. It doesn't go over the level, it doesn't boost up too much, and it just adds a little bit, but it's still one straight line, if you will. I can show you what I mean. So it doesn't change the kick.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the kick too much.
Complements it.
It complements it, exactly. Here in the very back, as you can see, it just adds this thing. If you would make this louder, just for demonstration purposes now. Cool. So, in case you have wondered why I have such a smooth, or why it shows the waveform like a still and it doesn't move too much, it's because the time here is set to the correct cycle time that matches the 142 BPMs most accurately. So those big settings, those settings are more suitable for the zero settings if you want to analyze the track as a whole. So let's put that back here. There we go. So yeah, back to the bass line. The wave. We want this overlap to really engineer really smooth. So you would see if that first note of the bass line is too loud, you would have too much bass in the tail and some kind of unwanted pumping. Let me just solo that for a bit. Have a listen.
It's front of the kick. Isn't
It's
it?
going way over the. Let's dial the bass into the kick. Okay.
Someone at home might be watching this and thinking, but I don't want my bass line to gallop. I want a machine gun 16.
Exactly. Then you can really play with the length of the kick, because then you don't really have to worry about this overlap. You can have a machine gun. I did a few as well, where the first note is a bit higher or as high as the other ones, which creates it makes it sound faster, speedier, obviously. So you can. That's where you can play with the length of the kick. Still there, you can give it a little overlap. As you can see, the tail of the kick changes drastically when I adjust. You can play really with how I do it. I play a lot with volume envelope curves, and this would be acceptable, because exactly where the kick stops, you have the bass coming in. It's carry, if you will.
One solid line.
It's
of
one.
notes.
Yeah, that's what I look after when I do a kick and bass. Obviously, there are a lot of different variations of kick and bass, but that's what I look for, like a continuation of the kick. So I won't go too deep into how the bass line was processed, because we will do this later on. Also, which is also due to the nature that how the bass line is done. I resample a lot. The processing. There's often 2-3 versions of a bass line, and then the end version ends up in the project that just needs some little touches of EQ, some high, really just some. This one has a 1 dB bump at 120 hertz to just give some body, a little bit of 3,500 to cut through the mix, a bit of 1,000 in that case. It all depends. Sometimes I cut a little bit of 1,000 from certain bass lines for the kick to come through better, because the kick has this very attack on around 1,000 as well. So yeah, those are just the finishing touches. So we will go later. We will go in depth into how to process this. Obviously, it's going here. The only thing that's a bit open here is the mix bus, because the kick and bass, they go to a group. They are grouped together right here, because I keep that mostly unrendered or open, until the end, because I have some EQ filters, some stuff going on, automations. So, but very important for kick and bass.
Yeah, take us through this group.
Yeah. So, what I really love is the Slate stuff. If you don't have it, check it out.
You can rent it now.
You can rent it now for a year, or I don't know how the pricing is. I've
It's like $15 a month, I think.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah.
To be completely honest, I don't like when they introduced this, but I bought them when they had that I don't know if you can still buy individual plugins for the full price, and then not. I think they can. However, it doesn't matter. You can get a demo and check it out. They are really, really, really cool. The only thing to mention with this and with all those mystical magic plugins is you won't hear the difference individually might not be very obvious between no plugin and this plugin on. But as it is in mixing and in the music, how I write it, there are a lot of little changes that add up to the end project. So
this is a really key point.
Yeah.
Make sure you're listening up, guys.
Yeah. So even if the change is not evident, it might be in the mix. So rather than do that, that's EQing, that's compression. Listen to everything in the mix.
Yeah.
Don't make it sound great individually, because sometimes stuff you have to make it in layman's terms. Sometimes you have to make elements sound worse
to
fit into the mix. So it's like I can't stress that enough. So listen to it in the mix. Listen to
no one ever hears it. So
yeah. I mean, you can obviously for surgical operations like cutting out humming frequencies or whatever, you want to solo your stuff. But if you do coloring or compression, listen to it in the mix. So the same goes with those plugins. They might not do a huge difference when it's solo, but when you mute them all in the mix, it's going to make a difference. So
so with stuff like this, especially the virtual analog, because we were chatting last night, and Phil was I think you made such a good point, which is sort of an extension of what you just said, which is that you don't really hear it in a big way on just one channel, but when you have them on every channel, that's suddenly it's not so subtle anymore.
Yeah, it is, and again, also a lot of people might not agree, or they don't hear a big difference. I mean, I do. For me, it really does the job. I don't want to say that it brings analog to your console. I wouldn't go that far, but it's a combination of things, of tricks that you can utilize to make it sound more organic and not sterile and often harsh, because the digital world is noiseless, and our ears, they love noise. They are used to noise, and it makes it sound more alive. So that doesn't mean that you put white noise over your track, but they have a very clever guy who writes, who's programming the algorithms, and I consider him a genius. I really like his stuff. So
what's going on?
So
here?
this is there are two versions of this plugin. One, you have the channel plugin, which is supposed to put on single channels, and then you have a mix bus plugin.
Okay, so it's like the Waves NLS.
Yes, kind of, which I also use here, as you can see. They're in concoction with each other. So it's a lot of. I also like to layer effects, if you will, not only elements, to achieve certain effects, which I think are beneficial. So this is the single plugin, and this is the mix bus plugin, which is which you're supposed to use on mix buses. So as you can see here, there are those two pink ones, kick and bass, and all the beats. They are in one group, and all the other sounds are grouped into buses as well. So ideally, you have some bus compression going on, which is here on each channel. Back to kick and bass. So this is what I have on. There are a few settings here which emulate classic gear. There are SSLs, I believe. This is an API. So on this one, I use the Neve because it introduces, and there's a Trident here as well, and their own house tube saturation good people of Slate came up with. So the importance of this is also gain staging. As with a lot of those plugins, it's what goes in, that comes out. If nothing comes in, nothing will come out. So you want to set up your gain staging properly. However, I chose Neve for this because in this plugin is the Neve setting on kick and bass brings out the low frequencies in a really, really nice way. Let's see if we can hear it individually. I can, just for the sake of demonstrating, I can turn up the drive knob, which saturates the effect a little bit more. So let's hear it. So let's do again without, with and without. Without. It does something in the low end because this is it's a bus compressor what's underneath.
Right.
So again, those little subtle changes
Add up
to one big thing. So that's also what where they do those. Don't be fooled by A/B tests. Oh, I've tested the massive passive real EQ and the UAD massive passive, and they sound the same. Yes, on the individual they A/B it on a full mix where only one unit is active, or on single elements again where only one unit is active. If you put those units all across your mix, they add up, and this is where the 3D thing
The
comes
difference,
together. Yeah, exactly.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So again, here this one I have the noise reduction on. Because it introduces some noise.
That's the analog simulation. They take that to the max.
Yeah, it's very low because here, if you add them all up, I have them all off. But if you would, let's quickly turn them all on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's on.
Okay.
They're on the group. I think everything that glues stuff together, it's not only whatever you put on a group channel, doesn't matter if it's kick and bass, your percussions, your sounds, whatever. If you put a plugin on the sum and you do something as simple as lift up one frequency band, 500 is it lifts up 500 hertz on all elements together. So kind of that's already something they have in common.
Yep.
So this unifies. It's pure psychology. So you kind of make them. Oh, they all have this nice little thing in common, which is 2 dB at 500 hertz. So it's kind of, it contributes to the gluing effect. So what I love to do also with kick and bass is, you can never have enough of 50 hertz.
We won't quote you on that.
Yeah. We won't. Please don't. But you have to use your ears.
Yeah.
There is a very distinct curve for sidetrans bass lines. Get yourself an analyzer and compare the tracks you like. Try to imitate. Don't be shy doing that. It's not cheating. You're doing research and development. I did it. The first tracks I have done, I took an Infected Mushroom track and I've rebuilt it from. Not that I've succeeded, but
you learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, along the way, and how things by trying to imitate something. Yeah. You obviously. I mean, if you learn an instrument, what do? You're playing other people's stuff because you can't come up with your own stuff. So it's no shame in that. So analyze your favorite tunes, and there are match cues as well. That will analyze your kick and bass, analyze the EQ curve, and then you can read your kick and bass as well, and then it will match the signal and put an EQ curve on that to match it.
You can't stress it enough, the referencing thing. You know, I actually have like a virtual sort of input-output referencing thing on my keyboard. So I've got reference tracks, and I've got 4, 5, 6. They solo my 3 reference tracks, and when they're solo, they bypass everything on the master channel.
Yeah.
And so you like, especially if it doesn't actually matter where you're at with your career, because you know, I've been doing it forever many years, and I still do it all the time.
I would say, especially at the point where you move forward. you don't want to get stuck. You
Yeah.
want to keep evolving, and you want to. It's like I want to push
Yeah.
it to the next level. Obviously, always, and you have to. There is always somebody out there who's better.
Yeah, but
You're
there's
never
also-
the best, so you're doing good. You're doing
Yeah.
good to yourself.
Yeah.
Just to compare your stuff
not?
to the best
And
stuff
there's
that's
people
out there.
referencing yours. So we're all
I
referencing
hope
each
not.
other.
No.
No.
Yeah. So there will be, of course. I'm aware of that, and it's good. I mean, I hope if that helps anybody, I would be really, really glad. So
But it's like everything from the overall tonal shape. You know, sometimes I remember once I was mixing an EP at the style of music. I only started referencing about 2 months in it, and I went, "Holy shit!
Oh, yeah.
everything's too dark."
Yeah.
Oh my god!
So all of a sudden,
and then all of a sudden, I
Yeah.
reapproached it, and then
Yeah.
you listen back to it, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this sounds really good now."
while you could have already in the track when you have to reference mix up all your hype. That's the main.
Quick blast.
Yeah.
Boom.
Don't. Another thing is don't leave it for mastering. That's another misconception as well. The best mastering chains I have done, and the best mastering chains that have been done to my tracks were the ones where nothing to very little needed to be done. So it all happens, I would say 80% happens in the mix. There is no such thing as magic. There are a few people who can do a little bit magical things as well with but it's all, in the end, it's just sweeten up.
It's not fixing.
You can't fix anything. You can't like fix it in the mix. I know there is something like that, but yeah, fix it in the mix. Don't leave it to the mastering, because you can just sweeten up or enhance the good stuff and the bad stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Okay, so we have a equalizer on the kick and bass.
And you're pushing the high mids.
I
a bit
am
there.
a lot, because
Does that help?
nowadays we live in a reality where we don't have monitor speakers at home. We have not rarely some kind of speakers at all. Everybody's listening on their phone a lot, or on headphones or whatever. You have to go, or on a laptop. So you have to kind of make those frequencies come through, even on different sound systems. And what helps a lot is just boosting upper harmonics. With upper harmonics is every note has its frequency. There is a frequency chart. You can download it on the internet. The A1 or something is at 440 hertz. So from there, 880 would be the next octave to A, and so on and so forth. 220 would be, if you have a bass line in A, 220 hertz.
110.
You would theoretically boost the harmonic at 220. There is just one little problem, because not always the numbers in all the DAWs and different plugins do really represent those frequencies. So in the end of the day, they're not 100% accurate, I want to say. So you're good to using your ears. So if you're somewhere in that range in the upper harmonics and you boost it, you listen to it. Let's make a little comparison with and without, because without, it sounds great on those speakers, but they reproduce 50 hertz and they go down. So not a lot of people have those kind of sound systems at home, simply. So you have to make it sound fat as well. Let's go with. And without. I'm adding them back one at a time so you can hear exactly what's happening. Yeah, let me just do an extreme example. Let me just put this all 2 dBs up. almost a little bit thin, but obviously too much. But you can hear those overtones. Ooh, ooh.
Yeah.
So sometimes as well, it doesn't have to be the same note. You can also do a kind of an harmonic. You can boost if you have a chord, yeah. G chord would be like G, B, D, or I think it's a G minor. However, whatever chord you have, you can basically harmonic EQing, if you will. You can boost any other
third, the
frequency, any
fifth.
third, the fifth,
or the orders. And
the orders. Yeah, well, anything that's it's a little bit like with the Camelot wheel, where you mix different keys, and there are certain keys that it's also taken from those intervals, musical intervals. Obviously, a semitone interval would be dissonant. Yeah. A whole tone might as well, like three semitones, 4 semitones, 5 semitones. So everything
Based
that
on normal triads.
yeah, that's the word. I only know the German. German, you help me with that. So that would be an extreme example. Let's dial that back again. So yeah, again, ever so slightly does the job. Let's hear it now again with the soft settings. So it adds a little bit of body. Again, check it
To
on
both of them.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, it's just really great for small speakers. Then C1 compressor from Waves, very very nice. I've been using it for years and years and years. They are a bit pricey, Waves in general, but it's really worth to get it. Yeah, for electronic music especially. So what this is doing is just doing, again, very slight compression just to glue it together. I found this one, you can go from the presets and bass enhancer preset if you have this one. If you change the split mode to wide and dial in as much threshold as you need, you will have something like this. So it's just a very, very slight compression, 1 to 2 to 1, 1.2 to 1, sorry. It's pretty much the preset, just a wide band, and obviously you want to dial in the amount of threshold. It's a kind of an expanding process. Yeah, it's as the preset, it's an enhancer, so you don't have compression where you would attenuate the dynamic range, but more expand. It's just really that particular plugin that has that quality. I've ran through a lot of them, and there are certain plugins that give certain color. Waves is very coloring plugins, so they are not very sterile or neutral.
Transparent.
So transparent, not really. There are a few transparent ones, but not all of them. So it also colors a little bit. There's a slight gain difference, but you can take my word for it. It does really glue them together.
Do you have a rule about where your kick and bass comes out in the master once they've been grouped? And for instance, like I would always have my kick and bass at -10.
Yeah, no, I don't have that reason. This track in particular was mixed very low. The kick and bass is, I think, at -12. Okay. Even lower at -19. It's a bit ridiculous. But the rule here is, in reality, when we are working digitally, there should be no noise, or there is no noise. Having a certain level comes from the old days where you would have mixer and analog devices that would create a noise floor at obviously at minus 80 or minus 90 dB, for example. And then if you produce at minus 20 and you have to bring it all up, you have to also bring up the noise floor by 20 dB. So the less you have to pick up the noise floor. For example, if you're at -3 with your master out, you just have to pick up by 3 decibels, everything, including the noise floor. So that was because we are working all digital. I did not hear any difference. There is no noise anyway. So it was produced very, very low in low volume. I'm tending nowadays to really go just not to peak, really. And if you want your kick and bass to sit, -10 is a good value, I would say. So you have still enough space for everything else to add up. You have enough headroom to the top. You should have like mastering studios request usually -3 decibels. So, but also nowadays they tell me just don't clip. So yeah.
Some people are really big on gain staging, but then there's some other big sort of voices in the audio industry who, especially recently, have been saying, you know what, gain staging, just don't push into the reds.
Exactly.
Especially in the box.
Especially in the box. Because the thing is, when you have analog equipment, what does it do when you go +3, +6? Well, the tube gets hot, and it's nice. This is what you want in some cases. What happens digitally is, some cases, some plugins, they are not programmed to go over 0 dB. So it's a simple mathematical problem, a programming problem. What does the plugin do over 0? It might do well, or it might do some digital artifacts you don't want. It's unpredictable. So that's why you also say you don't go into the clipping. It might just do something that it was not programmed for, because of the simple nature that it's programmed. It's code. So it does not know what to do with over 0. So that's also one thing that the Slate guys, it does. But that's one thing the Slate guys as well. The guy who programmed Fabrice Gabriel, I think it's the mastermind behind this. You can really go into the plus decibels without it to kind of distort. They try to emulate that. As you could see, I was in the beginning, I was in the red, and it was still sounding fine. This is where it would start to really to overdrive, but until then it's all good. Let me level that out quickly. The most crucial change, really, or very important for me for kick and bass, is any kind of multi-band action that's going on. So in this case, it was FabFilter, the Saturn I was using. It reminds me of the Quadrafoss, basically. I started on Cubase, and the Quadrafoss was a huge part, you know it yourself, of the bass processing. And what it is just really like like a multi-band saturation or distortion. So you can set it up really subtle. So the trick here is just to move the bands really and play with the bands. You can give each individual bands a bit of gain, and if you just flick through the bands, but which I didn't. Everything is on the main setting with 0 drive.
On the warm tape.
Yeah, on the basic. If you open the plugin, basically everything on 0. I add a few bands, just experiment with it, and let's see how it sounds with and without. So you can hear for yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously, it picks up in volume as well, but when you let's check the volumes without.
Yeah.
It's just 1 dB, but it sounds much, much huger. So what saturation does is it kind of acts like when you saturate something to a higher degree, it almost acts a little bit like a limiter. It squashes your signal, so you get a manageable, more consistent sound. So sometimes you were asking about compression, if you want to attenuate peaks or whatnot. If limiting doesn't do it, or if you want to use compression, that's fine. But there is a whole lot of other things which you can treat. Dynamic range, which isn't obviously dynamic tools. So if you want like a consistent sound or more manageable in the dynamic range, saturation can really help to tame it. And additionally, saturation on low end is very beneficial for bass to pop out of small speakers that don't have no sub.
Okay.
So also in a lot of different music I came across like the benefits of saturating or even distorting, again, ever so slightly, the low end. It comes out more. It saturates it. It's just it's fatter really. So there was really just 1 dB difference, but yeah, it sounded much bigger. So whatever you have really, multiband, try it out. That's one crucial part. Some might not like it. Just try it out for yourself.
Yeah.
So that's more or less it.
Cool. So it's the Slate Virtual and then the linear EQ.
The Slate.
And the Neve.
With the Neve setting, a little bit of drive noise out to bring some kind of analog feel if you want.
Yeah.
In this specific case, a little bit of the very low end, and again to just not attenuate, like actually enhance the upper harmonics of the bass, if you will. And
this is like an already sort of mixed kick and bass. That's all been done.
That's all on the group.
Final stage.
Yeah. A very classic way to introduce like a transition from one part to another, or to create a dynamic arrangement where you take out the low frequencies and to come back with them to create a bigger effect. Okay.
Awesome.
So that's.
And did you do that by hand or with the mouse?
As you can see, I do sometimes. I mean, this one was a bit dodgy. This was done by hand. Again, I'm listening to my ears. Those ones are
great, man.
Those ones are with curves. This one again is drawn in, and there's no big difference between those ones and the other ones. It's just
it's human.
If you want, humanized.
Yeah.
Often you also can't do, especially when you do leads. Sometimes you're tweaking something, and you are like, wow, if I just had recorded this.
Yeah.
So that's also a good one if you don't. We are making music. Record it. Use the audio. Don't spend too much time on clean mouse. I mean, it's important in some cases. Just don't go too crazy with it. It's you trust your ears, because our ears aren't perfect as well.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, your ear will most likely, even
and
if
your
you
hands.
It's
like playing an instrument.
It is.
Know? And hey, go down to Abbey Road. Look at the desk automation. They're hitting record and.
Yeah.
They're automating by hand.
Yeah, it's all over the place. They had to back in the days.
Yeah.
They had to mix. That was the mixing process. It was turning knobs, levels on the fly, and this was recorded.
So why not here?
And it does. I do a lot of that stuff. Or I would do some humanized automations by hand, or just record it straight into an audio channel. So automation becomes less of a click and point adventure.
Dude, awesome. We've got so much kick and bass to look at today. Because later on there's going to be this whole extended look.
Let's move on.
Let's move on to some percussion.
Yes.